Hey everyone, this is Mike with the One Stop Co-op Shop, and I'm coming back to one of my favorite games of all time, Arkham Horror, the card game. I finished the Drowned City, played through 1.5 full campaigns about, and I'm ready to share my thoughts on it in my ongoing series that kind of jumps around with releases in reviewing the Arkham Horror campaign expansions. And disclaimer that I was sent a review copy of this one. So I'm going to start off, as I usually do, by looking at the investigators and kind of the additions in a very general way to the player card pool. Then I'm going to talk about the campaign mechanics, talk about the narrative in the campaign, and then go through in a very non-spoiler way each of these scenarios bit by bit. So this time the campaign has 6 new characters instead of 5, and to talk through them. So Marion Tavares only has 1 hand, which limits what she can equip, of course. Her big thing is that she chains event plays. So after you play an event during your turn, draw 1 card, and then you can play a different event. And she's got her 2 unique cards, which are determined. And if she plays them in an event and it's successful, she gets them right back to her hand. So she can kind of do a ton of events that she wouldn't normally be that good at with her statistics and make sure that they're probably going to be successful. So that's about it for her. Then there's Lucius Galloway. This is one that I filmed, and I actually did a complete true solo campaign with him. Pretty solid guy. I'd worked pretty well for true solo in most scenarios, not all. He can't fight at all. He's got pretty bad willpower, but he evades and hoovers up clues like almost nobody. When he evades with his 5 agility, if he beats it by at least 2, he gets a free clue from his location as well. Really solid character. I had a fun time with him. George Barnaby, the lawyer, I find to be a bit of an oddball. His hand size is equal to the number of cards that he has put underneath himself, and he can do that whenever he discards a card. And then he can freely commit those cards as skill bonuses to his skill check. And you'll see that he has 3 of these Grim Resolve cards that give 1 wild boost to a skill check. So I guess he's supposed to be kind of churning through cards and then doing a ton of skill boosting, just having a lot of skills in his deck in general. I've never had a ton of success myself with a skill-focused deck, but it's cool to have another character to try that kind of thing out with. Next is Michael McGlenn, the gangster. He's a fun one. He's another rogue that is better at combat, which is cool because we only have a couple of those so far. And he's very interesting in that he's, I believe, the first combat character that is pretty much 100% focused on firearms and gets a really nice boost for firearms. Like after he spends 1 or more ammo from a firearm, he gains 1 resource. So you can just kind of churn through guns like nobody's business. Cool character. Definitely want to try him out. Then the mystic is Gloria Goldberg. She can mess with the encounter deck, which I'm not sure I've seen before, definitely not in this way. She can look at extra cards from the encounter deck. She can decide the order of the mythos phase, so if she knows that something's on top that like another investigator can handle, then she can make sure they're the one who actually draws it. She can put cards underneath herself, and then she can ignore recurring copies of those cards later, so pretty cool. And she's got a 5 willpower, 4 intelligence, so she can also just take care of business in a general way. Then the final very interesting one is Agatha Crane. I don't think they've done this before. There's 2 versions of her from different classes. And she's got the ability to recur spell or insight events from her discard pile, so she can play them again, although then they get taken out of the game. And she's got a little bit of chaos token sealing. So, I don't know. She doesn't seem as interesting as her split class would kind of imply to me, but she's a fine character. And now in terms of new deck building options, I actually found this to be a little disappointing. I mean, it's a cool concept. So the big thing is the vast majority of the new player card decks are these types of cards where your character's traits determine which cards you can add. These are all neutral experience cards, by the way, not your class or anything else. So look, any believer, chosen, or cultist can use this one. Any dreamer, performer, or sorcerer can use this one. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, each character has, that have never really been mentioned much before in gameplay, some of these traits that kind of define what kind of person they are. So it is cool that they're using those traits in a new way, and you'll see that the campaign does that as well. Well, sort of it does. But personally, I didn't find the cards in here to be worth their experience costs a lot of the time, at least for the characters that I've played through the campaign so far. So it's not as exciting for me as other investigator expansions in that I don't really want to use the cards that much, and they're not really making me think of all new deck builds. Since out of all the new cards, you can only use 1 or 2 for each character because they're very limited in who can use them. So, it's all right. It's not anything impressive, not anything exciting, but it is what it is. All right, but now getting to the new campaign mechanics, there's quite a few things to talk about here. First of all, they have flood tokens again. I think these were in Innsmouth last. Locations are getting partially flooded and fully flooded, and usually if you stay on them, you take some automatic damage. So it's not new. They've used it before. It's a fine mechanic, although I found it frustrating in some scenarios, but that one's okay. And then the other big card-based element is that you're finding these artifacts. Many of the scenarios have one that you can collect, and they have cool abilities that you can use for your characters. And then they have these little glyphs down here. And separately, in most of the scenarios, you have the opportunity to decipher these glyphs. That's often like one of the biggest sort of side questy things you can do in almost every scenario, and one of the main ways to get experience points. And what happens is if you've found every single glyph that goes above the little effect here on a given artifact, then that artifact gets boosted and you get the bonus meaning for it. And then also, not to spoil too much, both of these are being checked, the number of glyphs you've deciphered and the number of artifacts you've collected for later things in the campaign. And I will say, honestly, this is probably the biggest thing in these scenarios, trying to get these artifacts and these glyphs, because for better or worse, I'm going to talk about this in the scenario section of the review, many of the scenarios in this campaign can be completed very quickly, and it's really all about how long you want to maintain and stick around to try to grab an artifact and or try to decipher more of the glyphs. So some players are going to like that, some aren't as much. I'll certainly share my preferences in a moment, but that is really what defines a ton of the scenarios in the game, that there is a lot of stuff to discover optionally that you don't have to interact with if you don't want to most of the time. Another campaign element that I think works pretty well is that each of you very quickly gets one of these task cards, and they're kind of like a weakness or sort of a side quest that you have to do something for over and over again. And if you do that well enough in the campaign, you get some rewards. The big one being you get to flip it over to its mastered side and get like a major bonus. And these are suggested for specific traits or classes, so they are still trying to kind of emphasize the traits on characters like they did with the investigator cards, although here you can just pick whatever you want. You don't have to go for things that match your traits. And each of the scenarios will have one or two of the tasks that it kind of calls out and gives you a little extra narrative moment, but that's about it. So you're not going to get to like really dig into your task that much, but mechanically having to try to complete these things while also doing whatever the scenario asks of you, that's pretty neat. The final major campaign mechanic, and the element that theoretically gives this campaign the most variety, is that at the very beginning, after you've done the introductory scenario, you choose whether you're going to go from west to east or east to west, and that changes the order of all the scenarios. Literally, you're going to go in a different order. And that means for the scenarios, you're going to see either an easier or harder version of each of them based on where they are bookended in your exploration. And often it'll change up which agenda card or act card you're using. Sometimes it'll change up the mechanics, although I've found that to be a bit rare. Only a few of them really change drastically. For a lot of them, you just have more enemies, or you're moving down to up or up to down, so it like changes the directionality of the scenario. But yes, theoretically, you can play through all of these and see slightly different things based on whether you go west or east at the beginning. Now, there is also something with this big Cthulhu board, but that's a very specific thing to like one scenario that you might not even play, so I'm not going to talk about that at all. How about the narrative? I think it's actually weaker than Hemlock Vale, which already I didn't think was like the greatest narrative. Actually, I would say it's a lot weaker than Hemlock Vale, because basically you are going to the Drowned City, you're going to Relia, and you're exploring around. There's pretty much no NPCs, depending on which version of the campaign you go through. You might meet a few people. There's a couple people that like go along with you on the expedition. But yeah, besides that, you're kind of on your own. You're just kind of going around places. Honestly, there's not much of a narrative. It reminds me most, in many ways actually, it reminds me most of the Forgotten Age, where you're just kind of going through deserted places. Although even the Forgotten Age had like the two factions kind of playing off of each other and a bit more character to it. This one's just, hey, I'm in Relia, there's new stuff to look at, yay, Cthulhu shows up. So definitely not very impressive from a narrative standpoint. I don't think it's going to blow anybody away. But let's get to the individual scenarios. So first, the introductory mission, One Last Job. I recorded this one. It's fine. It kind of sets everything up. You meet some main characters. It gives you some different ways to interact with the criminal elements you're dealing with. It has a bit of branching, but it didn't really matter much in the end. So, it has like slight replayability, but nothing too impressive. So this one was okay. It does, by the way, use the same Arkham locations we've used 1,000 million times before from the core set. So that might be a disappointment for some people. Okay, then I'm going to talk through the scenarios east to west. The Obsidian Canyons is next. This is the one I did a bonus Patreon playthrough of. I thought it was pretty good. It's got a really interesting traversal mechanic where you're having to like kind of fill in these gaps as you're theoretically climbing through the air. And you can fall down and take tons of damage, and things are trying to like grab you and drop you. So decent enough scenario. I had a fun time with it. Next is Court of the Ancients. I found this one completely forgettable. Kind of the core thing about it is that it's a very claustrophobic floor diagram, and then you have an elevator elevator that's moving up and down. But yeah, it was over very quickly. There wasn't very much interesting going on, like narratively or mechanically. I don't know. I thought it was kind of a disappointment. The Grand Vault was a little bit better. It also kind of had an elevator that you were also kind of moving around. I don't know. I definitely found this campaign somewhat repetitive, especially with you almost always trying to get artifacts and translate the glyphs, which just made things feel even a bit more samey. But this one was better than Court of the Ancients. I liked the sort of traversal puzzle and also dealing with the water levels and stuff a bit better here. Next is the Apiary. This one got a little frustrating because you're asked to do the same thing like over and over again for quite a while, and you're basically like milling through the encounter deck to get to locations, to get them to spawn. I didn't find that part very fun. It is one of the most replayable scenarios though, because it changes things up significantly based on whether you're going west or east. So that part was nice, but yeah, I just felt like I was kind of doing the same thing over and over again, so that wasn't great. And hey, speaking of frustration and doing the same thing over again, the Drowned Quarter is, again, one of the more claustrophobic scenarios I've seen, like very small amount of area. And basically, you are trying to drain water out of these locations, but everything in the dang scenario is working to keep on adding water back in. So, man, it was a whole bunch of 2 steps forward, 2 steps back kind of feeling to the scenario, and just annoying overall. That's the Drowned Quarter. Didn't love this one. And then finally, did we end on a high point before we get to the finale? No, we don't. The Western Wall was also very dull. In fact, this one had even less going on than almost every other scenario. You can beat it in like 10 seconds, depending on how well you're investigating. You're just moving up or down. That's about it. I mean, it's really not much going on with this scenario, and it's really not that interesting, especially compared to some of the other ones that had better traversal stuff going on. And then finally, the finale is a 2-parter. First part's pretty interesting. I mean, it's very quick, but it does have at least something kind of unique going on. You're trying to sort of find something. The second scenario is big boss fight. It's got that board I showed you. It's got like these unique cards, and that was kind of cool, but oh my gosh, it is such a slog. Sometimes these Arkham ending finales are a slog, and this is one of the worst ones I've seen. You're literally doing the exact same thing like 1,000 times, and if you can survive long enough, then, good for you. This campaign also has a secret scenario. I'm not going to mention much more beyond that. It is a lot like Forgotten Age if you've played that one, and that's all I'll say. But yes, there is a special secret thing that you can reach by doing certain things. So overall, if you can't tell from all of that, I was not that impressed with the Drowned City. Now, it's still Arkham. It's still one of my favorite games of all time, so of course I still enjoyed myself with all my playing of it. But especially compared to Hemlock Vale, maybe my favorite Arkham campaign of all time, this one felt like a disappointment. The new investigators are fine, but not anything you need. The new investigator cards, like I said, feel very limited. The new campaign mechanics are kind of like repeats, and then they also feel like they make the scenarios repetitive and samey. And the biggest thing is just the scenario design feels so repetitive. Like it just feels like you're doing the same kind of thing over and over. And thus I got pretty bored as I was playing through. And then the finale was like really frustrating and sloggy too. So yeah, I mean, if you're an Arkham super fan, of course you should still get this. You're still going to have a good time with it. I'm still glad that I played it, but I would definitely recommend other campaigns way before this one. If I ever do a full Arkham ranking, this one is going to be near the bottom, to be quite honest. Sorry to say. Okay, well, that's the Drowned City. Thanks for watching, and a special thank you to our biggest Patreon supporters, J. William F., Pedro Lucas, Nick Skeen, Steve Wren, Miles, and Wayne Scott. We'll see you at the next stop.